I'm done!
That is it!
I won't take it anymore!
You guys have officially made me lose my marbles!
Intolerance. It can be a good thing sometimes. Hi folks, I'm Paul, and this is my take. Being an adolescent during the Obama administration and the rise of a new intersectional liberalism, the words tolerant and intolerant were thrown around a lot. There was a real push to shame any kind of intolerance. Progressivism was the way of the future, and that meant anyone who wasn't willing to get in line with essentially anything that progressivism promoted, they were seen as intolerant. Bitter clingers. But I've come to believe that intolerance can actually be a very good thing sometimes. There are things that we've been told that we must tolerate that I don't think we should. We've been conditioned over the years to tolerate a lot of bad behavior, and tolerating bad behavior is degrading to your society. The quality of public services and the beauty of your public places are directly linked to the level of bad behavior that your society tolerates. And that's a realization that I had when I lived in New York City, but didn't know how to articulate it until several years later. Every once in a while, there's this big discussion about how places like the Singapore airport are really nice, or how beautiful Dubai is, or how well and clean Japanese cities are compared to the public spaces and facilities that we have here in the United States. Now, I've never been over there, but from what I see and hear, yeah, their stuff is really nice. But whenever this discussion pops up, we rarely highlight why places like this are so clean and well managed. And that's because, in many regards, these societies are actually very intolerant of certain behaviors. You will get heavily fined, or sometimes even thrown in jail for something as small as littering in a lot of these places. Don't flush the toilet? Go to jail. Petty theft? Jail. Spit out your gum on the street? Straight to jail. Right away. Vandalize a bathroom stall? Jail. Or caning. You know. Places like the UAE are extremely authoritarian. These societies have rules, strict rules, and they enforce them. And that doesn't mean that these places don't have people who break the law. Everywhere is going to have those kinds of people. They're just serious about removing those kinds of people from their societies. Places like New York City are not as nice as places like Singapore for a number of reasons, but one of the largest and easily addressed is the fact that New York tolerates a lot of bad behavior, and places like Singapore don't. When I would ride the subway, it wasn't at all shocking to see people strung out on drugs. You weren't surprised by the occasional brawl, and seeing someone violently threatening and accosting the general public was a weekly, if not daily, occurrence. I see stories coming out of New York City all the time about people who are arrested for a crime and then immediately released back out into the general public where they can continue to violate the law. Assault, theft, vandalism, it continues to happen because we tolerate it. And in instances where it isn't tolerated, where it can't be tolerated by the citizenry, well, that's when the law actually comes into play. Your intolerance will not be tolerated. It's such an inversion of how things should be. And now that the trial is underway, it seems like it's a relevant topic again. It's true, Daniel Penny shouldn't have done what he did. Not because I think he was necessarily wrong to do it. He shouldn't have done it because he shouldn't have had to have done it. New York refused to do anything to stop something like this from happening. Jordan Neely shouldn't have even been on that train that day. He probably should have been in jail or institutionalized. What the media didn't tell you about him was that he had been arrested 42 times over the course of only a few years for things like theft, larceny, and assault on women. And the DA continued to just let him and other people like him back out onto the streets to reoffend. And of course, I'm not saying that I'm glad he's dead. Of course not. I did some research on him and my heart breaks for the guy. He had a really hard life. He had PTSD from his mother's murder. He was a schizophrenic. He needed help, but he was also dangerous. And the system in New York didn't do anything to protect him or the citizenry. Instead, it opted to tolerate. Now, was the solution to prevent this from happening more police activity or stricter criminal punishment? Maybe. Maybe you'd say it was more mental health care, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. But I think we can all agree that we shouldn't have been tolerating what led up to this. Now, the argument against enforcing the law and no longer tolerating bad behavior is that it's oppressive and discriminatory. And while it might sound kind of cold-hearted, I find myself saying, okay, oppressive and discriminatory against who? Criminals? Okay, I want my society to oppress and discriminate against people who have no respect for the law. I want bad people to be removed from the society so good people, law-abiding people, can go about their lives peaceably. I mean, don't you want that too? Why wouldn't you want a society that's tough on crime? And the argument I hear in response to that is, no, Paul, you don't understand. Tough on crime policies target minorities. And I say, okay, but you're going to need to explain that to me. They target minorities who are committing crime. They target white people who are committing crime. I don't care who's committing crime. I just want it to stop. But no, it's going to target innocent minorities. And you know, a couple of years ago, I could have been convinced by that. But since the widespread adoption of police-worn body cams, 95% of the time, I see those videos and find myself just saying, what did you want the officer to do? Just die? Maybe you do hate cops that much. I'm not a thin blue line guy either, but I understand the necessity of having a police force in a shared society with people who might not be capable of self-governing. Police brutality is a thing, true, I won't deny that, but body cams have really reduced the amount of believable claims of overextension of force by police officers. And again, I'm not saying that there's never any incidents where innocent people get hurt or killed by the police. That still happens, and I think when it does, the police officers should have to answer for that. But a few years ago, they'd have you believe that 50% of the time, officers were just shooting innocent people willy-nilly. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. And to use that as your main reason to not enforce the law, to not prosecute criminals, puts law-abiding citizens at a much higher risk of becoming victims of crime than they otherwise need to be. What I don't think a lot of people understand is that if you live in a city, you're almost certainly going to be living under some kind of power that is going to use violence to oppress someone. Is that power going to be law enforcement oppressing criminals? Or is it going to be criminals oppressing law-abiding citizens? There's also a third way where law enforcement oppresses law-abiding citizens, and we saw that happen in 2020 and 2021 during COVID. And funnily enough, the people who were anti-cop were pro-cop oppressing law-abiding citizens. It was a stupid time. We'll talk about that later. Back to my main point. What are you willing to put up with? Places like the Singapore airport are really, really nice and clean because they don't have to worry about people breaking the law and disrespecting the place. Japan has cushions on their subway, because they, as a society, have agreed to be respectful and keep things clean. Our subway trains are bare bones and drab, because why would we invest the time and money into beautifying those things when we tolerate behavior that would immediately destroy them? And maybe the people in New York are fine with the quality of life as it currently is. Maybe they're fine to put up with the dangers and dirt and smells of tolerating bad behavior. I personally couldn't tolerate it, and that's why I don't live there anymore. I just think people need to understand that you could have nice things, but you would have to stop tolerating a lot of bad behavior. That's all I've got for today. But what do you think? Do you think we let too much slide here in the United States? Have you ever been to one of the other countries that I've mentioned? And what was your experience like? I would love to hear your take in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. I'm also really appreciating all of the feedback that y'all have been giving me. It's awesome to hear from you. Hope you're well, and I will see y'all next time.